Hello YouTube viewers, finally here once again at the review table. What you're looking at is a Ryton Mosin Nagant model 1891/30 and we're going to talk a bit about this rifle today. The origins of this rifle can basically be traced all the way back to the year of 1877-78 when the Russians and the Russo-Ottoman War were basically getting their asses handed to them by the Turks. Now the Turks were using mostly American Winchester repeating rifles, which hold up to in excess of 15 rounds in some models. The Russians were still using single-shot Berdan 1 and mostly by then a single-shot bolt-action rifle called the Berdan 2. So like a lot of countries around the last half of the 19th century, the Russians started looking forward and thinking, well, we need a rifle which can fire more than one round before reloading. So they were trying to do away with all these single-shot rifles which were mostly dominating militaries until that point. In 1889 there were 3 rifle designs that were submitted as a replacement. First one came from Imperial Army's Captain Sergei Ivanovich Mosin, who had his .30 caliber or 3-line rifle design. There's another design from Ryton Nagant, who was a Belgian, and another fellow called Captain Zinoviev, who also introduced his own design. In the year 1891 trials eventually concluded, and the design by Sergei Ivanovich Mosin, or the 3-line rifle model 1891, was adopted for service. Despite its common name Mosin Nagant, it was not originally designated Mosin or Nagant. It was originally just called the 3-line rifle. One line is equivalent to 1/10 of an inch, so if you have 3 lines, 3/10 of an inch or .30 30 caliber or 7.62mm. When the rifle was first introduced, the Russian industry could not actually produce the numbers required to arm such a massive army that they had at the time. So they looked to other companies to produce it. The United States produced a few at Remington and New England Westinghouse, and Châtellerault, or not quite sure how it's pronounced, the French manufacturer, was also producing some of the earlier rifles. These rifles can still be found today and they'll have their own markings on the breech area. The American produced examples were only produced in World War I from 1915 to 1917. Obviously because of the October Revolution in Russia they stopped supplying them and they stopped producing the rifles. Some of those American examples were later converted to .30-06 and sold on the civilian market, and there were even some reports of them being supplied in World War I to supplement the lack of numbers of the M1903 Springfield. In Russia they were produced at 3 factories: Izhevsk, Tula and Sestroretsk. There were 3 different versions produced initially. They had an M91 long rifle, which was the full-length rifle for basic infantry. There was also a dragoon rifle, which was for mounted infantry, and a Cossack cavalry carbine, which had a much shorter barrel. The Mosin was just kind of the signature rifle of the Tsar's armies, or the White Russians. It was also used in the July and the October revolutions. Obviously, we all know what happened with that. And this rifle continued service up to the Russian Civil War, when the M91 long rifle was basically, it was sort of phased out, not officially, but it was mostly supplemented by the dragoon rifle, which was slightly shorter, and that's basically what most people were carrying. The Cossacks still retained their cavalry carbine. Now the most common variant of the Mosin Nagant, which is what you're looking at here, is designated the model 1891/30, or just usually in the United States referred to as the 9130 for short. Reason for that is a lot of the M91 long rifles, and mostly dragoon rifles, which were being used up till about 1929 to 1930. The year 1930 is when they decided to upgrade the rifle in general. They made quite a few differences, and that's when the version 91/30 came out, as in it was upgraded to the 1930 specification. It was officially designated in Russia as Rifle of Mosin's Design, model 1891/30. The 9130 saw its first major military action in the Winter War of 1939 to 40, the continuation war, that's between Finland and Russia, just like the Winter War. And the 9130 saw its first major military action during the Winter War. That was the Soviet invasion of Finland and the continuation war which followed. And it's by far its largest use being the Second World War against the Axis powers. Slightly prior and during World War II there were 2 more versions manufactured. There was an M38 carbine, which was basically similar to the 1907 Cossack cavalry carbine. It was just a shortened barrel. It was designed for rear echelon troops. Late 1943 they started testing variants of the M38 which had a side-folding cruciform bayonet. That was designated the M44 carbine. It's basically the same as the M38 with the addition of the bayonet and a cutout on the stock to house that bayonet. During the Second World War also, the Model 1891/30 with most commonly a PU 3.5 power telescopic sight really shot off in popularity. It was extremely popular with Soviet snipers and the like. It was first adopted in 1932 as a sniper rifle. Bent down bolt, started off with the PE scope, also the PEM. The cheapest scope which they manufactured in the war, like I just said, was the PU 3.5. The Mosin Nagant design was copied and manufactured in several countries. Estonia, Finland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Romania and Poland all produced their own versions at various times. Finland also adopted the M91 after it captured a lot of Soviet Mosin Nagants during the wars against Russia. And they also produced their own version, which was the M27. That was the main rifle that they fielded during the Winter War of 1939-40. In the continuation war, they also had a slightly shortened version, the M39. You'll also find a variant called the M59 carbine, which is basically a cut-down M9130, and the last 1,000 yards on the graduation site are also ground off. After World War II, the Mosin Nagant continued in service with a lot of the Soviet satellite countries and the Eastern Bloc countries, which is where it was also produced up until around about the mid-60s. The Russians immediately replaced the M91 at the end of World War II, mostly with the SKS and later the AK-47 AKM, although the rifle did stay in service with the Russian MOD for quite some time. The sniper rifle variant, the PU-mounted scope-mounted rifle, was also kept in service and mainly replaced by the Dragunov SVD. So now that we've briefly covered some of the history of the Mosin Nagant rifle, we're going to take a closer look at the rifle from butt to muzzle and also look at the accessories which you see before you. Pretty common with most rifles at the time, just a single metal plate. On top of the butt plate you should also find your serial number. Your typical Mosin Nagant 1891-30 stock will be a two-piece. You have the main piece underneath and the forestock, which is held to the main part by two barrel bands, which are held in place by a spring-loaded catch. The Mosin Nagant has a very basic receiver design, done so in such a way that it can be mass-produced on a large scale very quickly. There's no particularly complicated parts in the whole design of the rifle. The main two types of receivers you will find are what's known as an octagonal, more commonly referred to as a hex, which is actually incorrect. Anyone who's passed basic level geometry will know it's actually an octagonal receiver, such as this example. And you will also find the basic round receivers. The round receivers came into full production around 1935 to 1936. They were just slightly easier to make and quicker to mass produce, and pretty much all the war-dated rifles you will find with a round receiver. This particular example has an earlier octagonal receiver. The round receivers will just simply be smooth at this point. You won't have the octagonal shape. In general, the octagonal receiver made rifles tend to be slightly more highly prized by collectors, generally because they're not quite as common, and also there is slightly more metal mass above the breech. The quality of the rifle overall dropped during the manufacturing process from about late 1941 to 1942 and onwards. They really just needed to get rifles out in a hurry. On the side of the stock, most rifles will have this piece, which is a recoil crossbow. Obviously goes through the rifle onto both sides. Some rifles will not have the recoil crossbow. Some will be here, some will be there. I've even seen some in the middle, but that's generally rare, and some will not have a recoil crossbow at all. There is also a finger groove on the stock. Here we can see the markings on the receiver. My particular rifle was made at the Tula Arsenal in the year 1927. All the parts are fully matching. This inscription on the top is not found on most rifles, as most of the war-dated rifles, when they were just cut in production quality, they will simply have a date, a serial number, and a little symbol of which factory they were produced at, most commonly Tula or Ishevsk. My particular one has a star at the top, indicating it is a Tula-made rifle. There is also a Soviet hammer and sickle down here. I've done some research and I haven't been able to get an exact translation, but the breech markings on my particular rifle, I have found some images on other rifles online. It basically translates to manufactured in Russia, or CCCP. There is also another serial number present on the receiver, generally below the date. You can just see below the serial number on mine, there is a small square with a line through it. That's a symbol which would have been put on in the early to mid 50s, indicating that this particular rifle was arsenal refinished at a Soviet arms depot in Ukraine. There's also a matching mark on the back of the stock. Almost all Mosin Nagant variants will have a straight bolt handle. The sniper variants fitted with the PE, PEM and PU telescopic sight had to have a turned down bolt handle. Obviously if you had a straight bolt handle you would not be able to work the bolt due to the position of the scope. On the sniper rifles you can also not use the stripper clip loading method. The rounds have to be loaded one at a time. In the usual fashion, the operator must first lift the bolt handle and then retract it to the rear to expose the magazine. The Mosin Nagant's bolt handle was generally kept straight because it works much better in winter conditions if the operator is using large gloves or mittens, as a turned down bolt handle will be slightly more difficult to manipulate. The straight bolt handle just gives you better grip if you're wearing mitts versus if it was turned down and you're trying to get your palm under it. There is a bolt ball, but generally speaking it's not meant to be lifted by the ball. You just palm the ball quick and to the rear. It's a very simple action. The Mosin Nagant also features a cock-on open bolt. The way this works, there is basically a camming surface on the main bolt body which will push the striker piece backwards as the bolt handle is lifted. The rifle action can then be worked, close, and pressing the trigger to fire the weapon. All Mosin Nagant variants use a single stack magazine which holds 5 rounds of 7.62 by 54R, which is the standard cartridge in all Mosin Nagant variants. The magazine can be loaded one of two ways. The most common way was generally loose rounds. There's also a stripper clip. I cannot demonstrate the stripper clip loading process as I do not own a stripper clip. The Mosin Nagant is loaded like any other bolt action rifle. First, the operator must draw the bolt to the rear. The cartridges can then be loaded into the magazine. The Mosin Nagant features a single stack magazine which holds up to 5 rounds of 7.62 by 54R round. The action is then pushed forward which will chamber the first round. One of the interesting features of the Mosin Nagant rifle is the magazine interrupter, which is this small piece that you can see here. The idea of this is to prevent a phenomenon known as rim lock when using fully rimmed cartridges. Because the 7.62 by 54R is a fully rimmed cartridge, loading the next cartridge in with the rim behind the previous cartridge will result in rim lock when pushing the bolt forward and trying to chamber a round. The interrupter basically separates the rims and prevents the cartridge which is about to be fed. The rim on that cartridge will not interfere with the cartridge below. This is a very good design. It is not featured in other rifles such as the Lee Enfield, in which you must take extra care with making sure that you load the rims in the right place. To further demonstrate the use of the interrupter, loading a cartridge in and not pushing it past the interrupter means that it will be immediately chambered. Although when you're loading the magazine, every time you put in a cartridge, the next round will now be pushed down past the interrupter like this, meaning that when you load in the next cartridge and you try and chamber it, it will not at all, the bolt will not pick up the round underneath. This means that you have super reliable feeding. This extra distance that it's now travelled down to the magazine means that the rims will no longer interfere with each other. The magazine itself is very simple. It's not detachable in the sense that a Lee Enfield magazine is, but you simply, on the underside in front of the trigger guard, there is a simple catch which you then remove and you can swing out the magazine. It's a simple spring device, simply squeeze it together and it will unhook itself. If you have any kind of breakage or damage to the magazine, meaning it will not reliably feed rounds, good thing about the Mosin design is the magazine is very simple. In front of the trigger guard there is just a slight catch here. You just pull on that, squeeze the follower down to the floor plate and you can remove the entire magazine, chuck it, put in a new magazine assembly if anything's wrong with it. Very simple to do and speeds up field repairs. Many firearms enthusiasts out there will know that Russian weapons typically have very loose tolerances. The Mosin Nagant rifle is no exception. When you retract the action, pull the bolt to the rear, you'll notice there is a lot of play. Good thing about this is it's a much more effective weapon in dirty environments or cold environments. Due to the amount of space between the parts, ice, dirt, grit, sand can build up and you can still work the action, versus a rifle with a very tight tolerances. Say the Mausers are generally a bit tighter in general, and they won't have so much play. This rifle will definitely survive much better in snow, and almost every aspect about the action is designed to work more reliably in snow. Unlike the Mauser, the Mosin Nagant does not have a controlled feed mechanism. To pick up any rounds that are in the chamber, that means the extractor grabbing hold of the rim of the cartridge, you must first chamber the round. Although drawing the bolt will not pull the cartridge back, it will still be sat in the chamber. You actually have to lock the bolt down in order for the extractor to grab the rim. This can cause some slight problems. There's the exact problems that the controlled feed of the Mauser was designed to prevent. The idea is, if you try and chamber a round, for example, you try and chamber it, and for whatever reason the round does not go in and it gets stuck. Now, because the extractor does not instantly grab the round like the controlled feed, you may have this issue where you can't chamber the round because it's stuck in the chamber, and then someone's rushing at you and you're there with your fingertips trying to get this round out. Good thing about the Mosin is the way that the rounds are held in by the magazine. I could push this round into the magazine like so. Say if I try to chamber it, suddenly it gets stuck. Good thing is, the actual lips that hold the round in only go about halfway down the magazine, so you can simply lift it out without having to actually physically eject it. Removal of the Mosin Nagant's bolt is extremely simple. Simply return the action to the rear. Whilst pulling it to the rear, depress the trigger and the bolt comes straight out. Let's take a quick look at the bolt itself. For starters, the bolt head here would not normally be cut at a 45-degree angle. That's just part of the specifications from the proof house. The bolt itself is very simple. A lot of people do criticise it for being complicated, although this isn't really the case. All you do for basic field disassembly is to grab hold of the cocking piece, rotate it counterclockwise 90 degrees. That frees the bolt head and the connector bar, which you can then just pull straight off. To remove the bolt head, you simply turn that. Will only go one way. Turn that and remove it. You can then also use the Mosin multi-tool to go around the firing pin and unscrew it, and that'll pull out your firing pin and mainspring. Although it's a pain in the arse to do, and you didn't really need to do it in the field unless your rifle was extremely dirty. Carbon generally does not protrude past this part. The firing pin normally comes out slightly more, but once again it's just part of the specifications from the proof house that it can't have a full length firing pin. This is basically the camming surface. I'll just talk about this quickly. This is the camming surface in which, when you basically draw the bolt handle up, this camming surface here is what pushes back on the striker. When you close the bolt handle down, this piece is then held in place by the trigger sear. Reassemble the bolt head on the connector bar. Simply line up the grooves and you just rotate it. Will only go one way, as I said. Make sure that the bolt is in the uncocked position. There's a groove on this side and a groove here, which these corresponding areas fit into. Simply grab the bolt, line it up with those areas. Should line up with the front and the back there. Once you've done that, grab hold of the bolt handle, pull up. Very simple to do. To return the bolt, you simply depress the trigger and slide it right in. If you want to decock the rifle without actually dry firing it, with the bolt in the upright position, you simply click it ever so slightly to the right, and you get this little click. All you then do is squeeze the trigger, and that drops it down. You should never do that on a live round though, as the firing pin will be resting directly on the primer, and anything knocking that cocking piece could detonate the round, so you should never ever do that with a live round. There are several different types of rear sight you will find on the Mosin Nagant rifle. The earliest rifles had a unit of measurement which is known as arsheen, which is equivalent to apparently a soldier's pace. The slight difference with this rifle is because it's 1927 dated, it would have originally been a Dragoon. This is not the original sight that was put on the rifle. This sight is probably dated around early 30s, maybe 1930, 1931, when this rifle was converted from a Dragoon into a 9130. Upon lifting the rear sight, you can see that from the base of the barrel to the base of the rear sight there is a very slight gap. Rifles manufactured that started their lives as a 9130 will not have this gap. The reason there is a gap is because this rifle was not originally built with this sight. It's simply a push button on both sides. You simply squeeze that together and you slide it up to whatever distance you want to shoot at. For example, right now this sight is set on 1000 meters. It goes all the way up to 2000. Simply lift it, slide it to 2000. If you just wanted to shower an area target with a certain number of rounds, everyone would just slide their sights up and fire at whatever distance. The best sort of range you're looking at with iron sights is 500 meters for the average soldier, or 1000 meters if you're an exceptionally good shot. The Mosin Nagant Model 9130 has a rather impressive overall length. The barrel length is around 28.5 inches. Sight radius, I'm not quite sure the whole length of the sight radius, but you have your rear sight position here and your front sight position here. So you have a fairly good long sight radius. And the sights are not particularly designed for precision shooting at distance. They're only precise enough to basically hit a human torso. The front sight is composed of a very basic single post with a sight hood. The sight hood was added on the M91/30 and any subsequent models manufactured after 1930. The original M91 long rifle and dragoon will not have the sight hood, and it will have a slightly different front sight blade also. The Mosin Nagant bayonet was also commonly issued to most troops. In fact, it was so often found on the rifles that they never even manufactured any scabbards for them. The bayonet itself is what's known as a cruciform type. Reason being, it has basically 4 sides, and the tip is like a flathead screwdriver, and it can also act as a screwdriver. It's basically a socket type bayonet, which was generally obsolete by the 1930s and 40s. The Russians stuck with a long socket bayonet all that time. It's just simple to make, it's simple to attach, and it's very strong when it's attached. They never really sort of manufactured scabbards for these, as I said. If they had them, they were just intended to be kept on the rifle. The M91/30s were also zeroed with the bayonet on. The bayonet is very simple to attach. It simply slides on straight over the muzzle. Some of them can be stiff, as the Russian tolerances were not perfect. Mine's slightly stiff, it just needs a slight hand to get it down. Once it's down to this position in front of the front sight, pushing it more, you will be depressing the release catch. You then twist the bayonet a quarter turn to the right, which then clips it on. With the bayonet attached, the rifle is extremely long, and if I put the butt on the floor, it almost comes up to my exact head height. The main advantage it does give you, however, is because it's so long, it gives you a lot of reach, versus rifles which generally have a shorter overall length, shorter barrel length, or a shorter bayonet. This rifle does allow you in a bayonet fight to have increased reach over your adversary. To remove the bayonet, depress the release catch on the underside here. Rotate it towards the front sight. You can then simply push up on the bayonet to remove it. The Mosin Nagant was often issued with the canvas sling, which attaches to the underside rifle at both the rear and the front of the stock. Removal is very simple. Just like any belt, you simply pull out. Can be so stiff, but they basically will just fall straight through the rifle like so. This is the Russian standard 7.62 by 54mm rimmed cartridge that's been in service since 1891 and is still in service today with many weapons. It started its life in service with the Mosin Nagant M91 long rifle, but has been used in pretty much all their Maxim, Degtyarev light machine guns, SG-43, PKM, Dragunov SVD, and various other weapon systems that are still in use to this day. The projectile itself weighs on average from 150 to 181 grains. The average full metal jacket round that was issued was 150 grains. Ballistically, it's quite similar to the American 30-06, and just to compare, let's put an 8mm Mauser next to it. The 8mm Mauser, or 7.92 by 57mm cartridge, was the standard German military cartridge of World War II and before. So these two cartridges were what were being thrown at each other on a daily basis on the Eastern Front during World War II. The difference in the rims can clearly be seen here. The Russian 7.62 by 54 are on the right, and the German 8mm Mauser on the left. The German 8mm Mauser is a semi-rimmed cartridge, whilst the Russian cartridge is a fully rimmed cartridge. The fully rimmed cartridge does produce a more reliable extraction. Generally it works better in machine guns like the Maxim M1910 that use a pull feed system, as it gives any extractors in the weapon a bit more of a rim to grab hold of. The Russian 7.62 gets the prize for the longest running military cartridge service life in history. It's been running from 1891 right up to the present day. These are two very fine examples of a standard Russian Mosin Nagant ammo pouch. Each pouch can hold, I've managed to cram up to 13 loose rounds in each pouch, or 2 stripper clips, which is 10 rounds. To open them, basically pull on the bottom. They can be quite tight. Just yank on them and open. You can see all the rounds exposed there, which can then be removed and loaded into the rifle. This is an original World War II cleaning kit. First thing you'll find is a Russian oil bottle. Now these characters stand for something in Russian. The left basically stands for alkaline, the right stands for oil. This container down inside is parted down the middle. basically unscrews. Have given these a clean up, and they do still have some contents in. God knows how old some of that may be. This is a war dated example. Some of the post-war ones will just have one single container for oil only. The war dated ones will often have two. This is the complete contents of the pouch. We have the oil bottle as shown. This is the Mosin Nagant multi-tool. The idea behind this is you have a flathead screwdriver. This notch here can be used to unscrew the firing pin, and these two are for measuring firing pin protrusion. If you want to know more about that, I can't actually demonstrate that due to the fact that my firing pin is not full length, but if you want to see how that works, there are plenty of videos on YouTube which show you how to use this. These other pieces are basically what builds up into your cleaning rod. To use the cleaning kit, all you need to do is remove the cleaning rod from the underside of the rifle. First thing you need to do is to grab this piece. This will form up your handle. With the fully exposed side, not the smaller side, put it over the threaded end of the cleaning rod and slide it up until the two openings line up with the two openings at the end of the cleaning rod. Simply take this piece, this is your handle, and you slide it through, which then forms your handle. This piece is a muzzle protector which essentially protects the crown of the rifle so you don't damage it. Slide the smaller end over first, straight over the end. And finally, this is the brush end. This piece at the front, which is your brush, will rotate separately of this piece, which will then screw onto the threaded end of your cleaning rod. The idea is that when you're pushing it down the barrel to clean it, this will rotate in the grooves in the barrel. Get the threaded end of the cleaning rod and screw it together. You simply can then push it down the barrel to clean it, and that will rotate and clean your barrel, and this basically builds up into your handle. To break it down again, it's pretty much the opposite. Just unscrew it from this end. That removes your brush. Go up to the rear end, pull off the muzzle protector, the crown protector, pull out your handle and drop the last piece out. Well guys, that's been a look at the Mosin Nagant M1891. Hope you enjoyed the video, hope you enjoyed watching it as much as I enjoyed making it. For anyone that wants to know, everything I showed in the video I purchased from Ryton Arms at the War and Peace Revival, that's War and Peace 2013. Highly recommend Ryton Arms, great site, great staff, great everybody. I'll put a link in the description to their website. So that's it for now. I'll hopefully have some more reviews on the way. I'll probably have a comparison between the German K98K and the Mosin Nagant 9130 on the way, so stay tuned for that. So thanks for watching guys.